Hey, it's Jess. Welcome back. Today I'm here with my incredibly late June wrap up. I realize that it's over halfway through July, but with summer ween and everything else, I just got really behind on filming videos. I have my phone here for my stats. I'm also going to put them up on the screen next to me. This month I read 10 books, which equaled out to be 3,209 pages. They've added another section to Storygraph that tells you the average time to finish a book, and mine this month was 11 days. I was on vacation the first week of the month, and although I brought a book with me, I didn't get a chance to read all that often, and we were driving, but my husband and I were listening to the Critical Role podcast and catching up on that, so I didn't listen to any audiobooks or anything like that. So definitely took me longer than usual to read books in June, but I still got 10 done, and I still think that that's great. Looking at my moods, as usual, dark, tense, mysterious. There's no surprises there. This month, I did read one nonfiction book, and the other 9 were all fiction, so I finally got some nonfiction back in there. Looking at my genres, thriller and horror are the top. Again, not a surprise. That's what I read most of the time. Looking at the format, 2 of the books I read were audiobooks, 2 of them were ebooks, and 6 of them were physical books. So lately I've had my audiobooks have been a larger number, but this month, maybe it's because I'm home more, but physical books were a larger percentage of my reading this month. My average star rating was 4.13. I had 2 books that have no rating, 1 3-star, 1 3.5 star, 2 4 stars, 3 4.5 star, and finally 1 5-star read. I haven't had a 5-star read since I think March, except in May I reread House in the Cerulean Sea, so that's a 5-star, but this is the first 5-star I've had that's a new book, a new to me book since March. So I was so happy that right at the end I got another 5-star. Before we get to the book ratings and talk about the books I read, I want to talk about 2 books that were on my June TBR that I didn't get a chance to read. I had picked From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Doughty from the TBR jar. I just didn't get around to this one in June. This is a nonfiction book. Caitlin Doughty runs the YouTube channel Ask a Mortician, and for this book, she went around the world and learned about death practices and death rituals in other countries, and then wrote about them. But again, I didn't get to this one, so I'm going to take the piece of paper from it. Set this down. I'm going to take this piece of paper and put it back in my TBR jar. Hopefully I'll get to it soon. Maybe I'll pick it out again. I don't know. The other one that I didn't read was The Sea Dragon Heir by Storm Constantine. I started this one. I got through the prologue. So I'm on chapter 1, page 18. I don't know. When I finally had time for this, I just wasn't feeling it. And this is such a chonky book, and the writing's kind of small in it. And I didn't want to force myself to read something that I wasn't in the mood to read. So I will also take this slip of paper and put it back in my TBR jar to hopefully pull another day. So 2 more got returned, but I did read, I think I read every other book on my list, I think I read every other book on my TBR, and then a couple more. So I still did good. I just didn't happen to get to those 2. Now we're going to talk about the books and the ratings. One of the books I read, I will not be reviewing because it was published by St. Martin's Press. And if you are unaware, there is a boycott against St. Martin's Press right now. I'm going to read you what the boycott is. It says, the boycott of St. Martin's Press, Wednesday Books, and other related imprints is a direct response to the publisher's lack of accountability regarding statements made by an employee in their marketing department and their failure to respond to concerns about possible systemic issues within the department. I read this book because the boycott is not asking people not to read St. Martin's Press books. It's more, don't advertise them, don't review them, don't talk about them until they release a statement, acknowledging the actions and statements from their employee. So I was unaware when I picked this book up. I didn't realize that they were the publisher, and I didn't know much about the boycott at the time. So anyway, long story short, there's one book I'm not going to be talking about. I didn't review it, but I want to let you know why I'm only talking about 9 books. That's a way shorter explanation than I gave, but whatever. The other book with no rating was a nonfiction book. As you know, I typically do not rate nonfiction books because who am I to say how I enjoyed your story? Or sometimes they're informational, and I just don't like to rate nonfiction books. The book I read was ADHD for Smart-Ass Women by Tracy Otsuka. This was interesting. It took me a really long time to read this. I think I picked it up at the beginning of May, and I didn't finish it until the very end of June. It was really interesting, and I feel like I learned a lot about ADHD and some coping skills, but a lot of it I also felt like I kind of already knew. It did come from my bookshelf, so it's another book from my physical TBR that I can check off that I've read. And I have the slip of paper for it right here, and as a reminder, I have this piece of paper. As a reminder, I have this jar that we are collecting all the books that I've read from the TBR jar. So again, you can't even see that. It's not super full yet, but it's getting there. The one 3-star book I read was The New Couple in 5B by Lisa Unger. I had this book as a physical book, but I also found it at the library as an audiobook, and so I actually listened to this book. In this book, you are following Rosie and Chad. They are a married couple living in New York, and Chad's uncle passes away and leaves them his apartment in this exclusive building, but his uncle had a daughter named Dana. Dana is very upset that she didn't get the apartment and that his, Chad, who is the nephew, got the apartment instead. And then strange things start happening, and Rosie starts, thinking life isn't as great as she thought it would be in this exclusive high-rise apartment. I did make notes about this one while I was listening to it. I wrote, the beginning reminds me of Rosemary's Baby. A young married couple moving into an exclusive apartment building. The older couple who lives next door befriends them. Everyone's acting super weird. It even goes so far as Chad isn't acting like the husband in Rosemary's Baby. There's even, talk of babies, pregnancy, things like that. I don't know if I would have correlated the two as closely if I hadn't just read Rosemary's Baby. I read it in the summer or the fall. And I listened to it. So listening to Rosemary's Baby within the last 6 months, well, a little more than that. Listening to Rosemary's Baby within the last year, and then listening to this book, at the beginning all I could think of was, this is Rosemary's Baby, but not done as well. It had so much potential. But it kind of just went nowhere. I really didn't like the ending. I didn't really like the twist in it. It was just mediocre. If you want a good book about a couple that moves into an exclusive apartment, I would recommend Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin, or even Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. That was a cool book about a couple that moves into an apartment, they win an apartment in a lottery. That was a great book, and I read that earlier this year, in the fall. So eventually I will talk about that in one of my Wayback Wednesdays. But I recommend that Nestlings or Rosemary's Baby if you want to read about a young married couple that moves into an apartment. The one 3.5-star book I read was Larry by Adam Millard. I first heard about this book from Jordaline Reads here on YouTube, and I had never seen it in person. I'd never seen a physical copy of it. I went to the library and saw it, so I was like, Jordaline loves that book. I better pick it up just to read it. This is a slasher. The book starts in 1978, and you are following a man named Larry who dons a pig mask and goes on a slaughtering spree at a summer camp called Camp Diamond Creek. And he learns the new rules for final girls and horror villains and everything like that. So the next part of this book picks up in 2004, where a new group of teenagers are going up to Camp Diamond Creek. It is basically abandoned. No one goes there anymore. There's an urban legend about the pig face, serial killer, and Larry hears about these people coming up, and so Larry once again dons his pig mask and goes on a slaughtering spree with this new group of teenagers. I really liked this book. I gave it a 3.5. I don't know why. It might go up to like a 4. I really enjoyed it. It was a fast read. It was fun, but it also wasn't anything I'm ever going to think about again. I wouldn't recommend it if you don't like slasher books, and it's just a little silly and far-fetched, which is fine. I'm pretty sure there's a sequel, so I might have to pick that up just to see what that one's about. Again, I liked it. I'm glad I finally got to read it. I've been hearing about it for years. It's not one that really stuck with me, and so it ended up getting a 3.5 for me. The first 4-star book I read was The Lonely Below by G. Heron Davis. I received this as an ARC from NetGalley, so I read it on my Kindle. And when I had requested it, this is on me, I did not pay attention. I did not realize / remember that this was a middle grade. So not even young adult horror, it was a middle grade horror. In this book, you are following Eva. She is attending a boarding school because her grandmother recently passed away and her parents have to go and sort out her grandmother's things. And so they're leaving Eva at this boarding school, and it's actually the school that her father attended when he was a child. So they have a family connection to the school. And as Eva goes, she starts seeing scary things and hearing things, and she starts seeing ghosts and getting creeped out. What is unique about this book that I really enjoyed is our main character is autistic, and she doesn't name that for a while, but I work with autistic children, and so just the beginning I was like, oh yeah, she's definitely neurodivergent, and I assumed that she was on the spectrum, and she is. And I just thought that it was a really unique perspective to write from. And so I did enjoy that about the book. If I had read this when I was a young teen, middle grade, I probably would have been scared by this. I thought it was very atmospheric and creepy. I liked the story. Just, it wasn't totally for me because I don't read that much middle grade horror. But if you have a younger child who is looking to get into horror or does like horror books, I think this would be a great one for them to check out. My next 4-star read was Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. This is the book that I chose for June's Buzzword Readathon, which is hosted by Books and Lala here on YouTube. The reading prompt for June was repeating words. So wrong place, wrong time. That's how I got this one. This is also a book that was on my physical TBR shelf, but the paper for it is somewhere in here. I need to dig out. I've read a lot of books that I didn't pull the papers for, so I need to go through and dig out the ones that I've read so I can add them to this jar. But for now, just pretend like I have another paper in there. In Wrong Place, Wrong Time, you are following Jen and her husband, Kelly. And one night, they are up waiting for their son to come home, and something tragic happens with her son. He is arrested, and she's trying to figure out what happened with him. And when she wakes up the next morning, it is the day before it happened. So this happened Saturday in the early morning, 1 a.m. She wakes up Friday morning. And every day she lives her day and wakes up and it's the day before. So she is going backwards in time trying to figure out how to help her son, how to stop this crime that happened, to stop him from getting arrested. And she's also figuring out that her husband is hiding secrets from her, and her son is too. And this was a wild ride. I really liked it. The first chapters were like day -1, 8 a.m., day -1, 9:30 a.m., day -2, 8 a.m. And then she talks to someone and then it starts going back. So it's like we're on day -42 and then suddenly we're day -65. Then we're day -112. Then we're day -500. I think it goes back to the thousands. So I definitely felt suspense that I was like, is Jen ever going to get back to her real time and to her husband and to her son? And I just felt a lot of worry and grief for her that she kept going back and she kept going, when am I going to be done? Am I just going to keep going back in time until I don't even exist anymore? I don't know. Obviously there's something I'm missing. I thought this was a good thriller. I read it pretty quickly. I really enjoyed the story. It was unique to me. I'd never read anything. Like usually when you read time travel, it's not, it's like Groundhog's Day where you repeat the same day over and over. It's not going backwards, and especially not going back that far. Again, that really stressed me out sometimes. But overall, I'm glad I picked this one for the buzzword readathon. I'm glad I finally got to read it. It was a roller coaster ride and I enjoyed it. The first 4.5-star book I read was Fantastic Land by Mike Bachoven. I picked this one out of the TBR jar. It is a book that I want to read, but not one that I own, but I do have a slip of paper for it, so I am going to go ahead and put it in here. Yay, more paper for the jar. This book is written in a series of interviews. It is about a theme park named Fantastic Land, and a hurricane hits Fantastic Land and shuts it down, and people are stuck inside. So the book is a newspaper reporter or some kind of reporter. He might be like a podcaster, I can't remember. Is interviewing all of these people about the horrific events that happened in Fantastic Land, because you give a bunch of people free reign with no rules and you don't know if you're going to survive, and people will definitely show the worst sides of themselves. And I thought this was so interesting. I bet the audio is really good. I couldn't find an audiobook copy of this, but since it's just told as interviews in the book, like that's what the chapters are, just interviews with these people. Some of them are like, the first ones are people who are in like the Red Cross and why didn't they evacuate Fantastic Land right when the hurricane hit. And then some of them are people who like, engineers for Fantastic Land, but then it's also people who survived Fantastic Land and they're telling their story about what it was like on the inside. And it was just so captivating. I read it really quickly and I really, really enjoyed this one. It was another unique book. I've never read anything like this one. And it really does show you that sometimes survival situations just really do bring out the worst in human beings, and none of them can be trusted. So that's a lesson learned from that book, but I highly recommend that you check it out and pick it up because it was a good read. The next 4.5-star book I read was None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I also picked this one out of my TBR jar, so I have a piece of paper for it. And when I picked it, this book, I did not own it. And then it was getting towards the end of the month and all the copies on the library were taken and I had to order another book for work. So I just ordered this one too, which is kind of like defeating the whole purpose of the TBR jar, that I'm trying to like get my physical TBR to 0, and I just keep adding books. but such is the life of a reader. I ended up buying this one. I'm really glad I did because I really enjoyed it. In None of This Is True, you are following Josie and Alex, who turn out to be birthday twins. They meet at a pub on their 45th birthdays. They realize that not only were they born the same day, they were born in the same hospital, and they live a few blocks from each other. This is set somewhere in England. I don't know where. But I think most Lisa Jewell books are set in England. The three that I've read have all been set somewhere in England. Anyway, Josie finds out that Alex is a podcaster and has a fairly popular podcast where she interviews successful women and tells their stories. So Josie goes to Alex and says, "Would you like to tell my story? Because now that I'm 45, I'm going through a life transformation." And so Alex agrees because she's just so interested in Josie. And then things just get crazy and you find out that Josie is a little crazy. This is a big he said, she said. Josie's telling her story. Alex is horrified. And then Alex is trying to talk to other people in Josie's life and they're like, maybe not all of that is true. And so Alex is having to piecemeal and discover what is actually true and what Josie has been lying about. I love Lisa Jewell's writing. It is, again, very captivating. I wanted to know what was going to happen. The end to me was just a little bit off the mark, which is why I didn't get 5 stars for me. I still really enjoyed it. It just wasn't, I don't know, it just didn't feel like a 5-star book. Very rarely do I give thrillers 5-star books. And, but I did enjoy this one. I'm glad I own it. I would probably go back and read it again because one, I read it so quickly. I would like to go back and read it again and see like what clues to lead up to the whole climax and everything like that. I won't read it anytime soon, but I'm glad I ended up buying a copy of it. I did really enjoy it. It was nice because a lot of it took place in June and July, so it was a good summer read. My last 4.5-star book was Daisy Hates by Jessa Hastings. These books have taken over my life. I can't stop reading them. I can't stop thinking about them. I really liked Daisy Hates. It was a little hard for me to get into because Daisy's chapters had footnotes in them. So you'd be reading along and then there was like an asterisk and you had to go at the bottom and she had something to add to it. And that you don't see that very often in non-educational books. And so it was just a little bit jarring for me at first, that format change. Daisy's chapters that are the only ones that happens in, so as I got farther, it was easier to kind of keep up the pace and read it. You also get chapters from Daisy's brother Julian and from Christian. Daisy Hates is a book that's set in the Magnolia Parks universe, and this book actually takes place at the same time as Magnolia Parks does. Daisy's brother Julian is basically like a gang lord and she is not involved in any of the illegal stuff. She likes to stay at home. She loves to do laundry. She loves to cook for the boys in the gang. She's going to school to be a doctor and she is having trouble with her love life because what would this book be if it didn't have toxic romances in it? And it was very different than Magnolia Parks. It took a hard turn towards the end and it became almost like a thriller. Like there were some suspenseful parts in it that I did not expect. And so I really enjoyed it. I don't like Daisy and Christian as much as I like Magnolia and BJ. There's just something about that couple that I can't get over. But I did really like this one. I liked the change in story, which is why I got a 4.5 for me. Jessa Hastings has magnificent writing. It's so poetic and lyrical, and it sounds all fancy dancey, but it's not. It's just something about it really pulls me in, and I enjoy reading these books. I've already read the third one, which is Magnolia Park's A Long Way Home. As soon as I finished that one, I put the next two on hold so I could read them right away. Yeah, I can't get over this book series, and I don't know why, and I don't know if I want to. Like, I haven't bought these books, but I'm really close to buying them. I just want to get like the UK covers because the US covers are hideous. I don't know who thought that they were a good idea. They don't portray anything that actually happens in the books. So I prefer the UK editions, but I got to save up some money before I get those because that's going to cost a pretty penny because I don't live in the UK. Anyway, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I highly, highly recommend Magnolia Parks. Even if it's something that you think you wouldn't read, I never thought that I would like this book. It is not the type of book that I normally read, and I read it and was completely enveloped by it and dove into that world, and now I can't get out. So I highly recommend you check it out, even if you think it's not a book that you would like. And finally, my 5-star book, the first one I've had since March, was Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. I had been hearing about this on YouTube and saw that it was available as an audiobook at my library, so I picked it up, and I am so glad I did. This was a roller coaster, let me tell you. In this book, you are following Rosemary, who has just broken up with her long-term boyfriend, moved to a small town to get away from the city life. She is basically trying to start her life over. Just get to like the simple things in life. While at the farmer's market, she meets Ash, who is a local woman who sells cupcakes and plants and things like that. Rosemary prefers to go by the name Ro. She doesn't like her full name, so she uses the nickname Ro. Is immediately enamored by this woman and starts feeling feelings that she's never felt before. She discovers that she may not be completely straight and doesn't know what to do with that, but decides to go all in, and she pursues Ash. And things go from there. But Ash is not all that she seems and is hiding a dark secret that she does not want anyone else to know. The end of this book, my jaw dropped. I was like, oh, wow. That ending is what gave it a 5-star. A lot of people said that they were not surprised by the twist in this. I had figured part of it out, but it was beautiful. It was beautifully written. I loved the imagery. It was a wonderful audiobook, so I highly suggest it if you can find it on audio to listen to it that way. And again, that ending just had me floored. I'm so glad that I listened to BookTube and finally picked it up. And again, I finally had a 5-star for the first time since March. Totally worth it. Highly recommend that one. Those were all the books that I read in June of 2024. Not my best reading month, considering I was on summer break and not having to go to work, but 10 books, still very admirable, and I enjoyed most of the ones that I read. A couple, again, just mediocre, but overall, a great reading month. July, now that it's almost halfway over halfway over, has also been a great reading month, and I can't wait to talk about all the books that I've read this month. But I want to know, have you read any of these books? What did you think? All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.